French Parliament elections will be held in May and June for the district of the French citizens living in Benelux. As Volt, we want to present this evening the added value of Volt for l'Assemblée Nationale and explain how we will represent the 160,000 French citizens living in the Benelux. We will do that this evening with three amazing guests, one current Volt European Parliament member and two candidates for the upcoming election. My name is Christian and I will be your moderator for this evening. To start with the introductions, our first guest is the candidate Cédric. Cédric has been working for 15 years on the energy and ecological transition of Europe as an engineer and urban planner. He came to live in the Netherlands 5 years ago to fully experience his European citizenship, to discover another culture and get involved locally. He now advises Dutch municipalities to get rid of fossil fuel, and he has also been advocating for a stronger Europe and a renewed democracy for a long time. At Volt, he could finally find his political home in a transparent, positive, bottom up, participatory movement. Our second guest of this evening is the candidate Audrey. Audrey has a PhD in physical and analytical chemistry. Audrey has been an expert in sustainable development in the last 20 years, even before there was a name for it. Her expertise allows companies to place sustainable development in their DNA and to take advantage of it to increase their competitiveness and attractiveness. She also works to integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion into business strategy to foster innovation. Her motto is saving our planet, protecting people, advancing economic growth, our one and our only fight. At least for now, welcome to Cedric and uh, Audrey. And now I also see that our final guest, Damian, is also present. A tiny bit late, but we're still happy to have you here. Damian is our final guest, definitely not the least guest. In 2017, Damian co founded Volt as an answer to the growing nationalistic tendencies noticed all across Europe. In 2019, Damian was elected as a member of the European Parliament, joining Volt in cooperation with the Greens Party in Brussels. Originally from Frankfurt, Damian spends his time between Brussels and Berlin and all over Europe to gather input and talk to the thousands of Europeans that supported the Volt campaign. As a parliament member, his goal is to create the foundations for a stronger and more united European Union. Being part of different committees, Damien aims at building a more transparent, more integrated, and more transnational European Union. Welcome all.
Thanks.
To
Thanks for the invite and for the great introduction, Kizan.
yes,
Very professional.
good to know for all the people who are watching at home. Besides my questions, you can put questions in the comment section, and I will try to squeeze in some of those listeners' questions in the questions that we're doing this evening. Yeah, so now let's start with the questions. And to focus now first on the Benelux campaign, Volt strongly advocates for an update of our democratic software. Damian, to start at a European level, why is this needed and what do you propose in this?
You mean with a democratic software?
An update of our democratic software. Why does democracy needs to be improved?
Okay. So, I mean, I think that's quite straightforward. So democracy is always something that we need to work on. It's not a static kind of a thing that we can just assume is there, but it's always a bit in a flow, I think. Like you can always see that people get more active. I mean, to just give you, or less, to give you one little small data point, since the 1980s, party membership has halved in Europe. So if you look at what happened since the 1980s to today, people basically don't want to join parties anymore. They find them boring or not interesting, or at least just don't even think about joining parties. And I think that in itself is something that we need to discuss. And very often then people say, we need more liquid democracy and, more activism on single topics and blah, blah. That's all fine and good. But the issue is that still parties put out candidates and candidates put on lists, and lists are getting elected. And these people are then like the people that take decisions in politics and in our government. So as long as we have party democracy, I think we cannot just put it to the side. So that's generally the case. But then obviously, if you look at the European democracy, we have a bit of a more peculiar issue, and that is that very much when it comes to the core of matters, when it really boils down to the most important decisions, it's still the heads of state and governments who come together and to take the most important calls. You saw that actually kind of positively when the EU Recovery Fund was proposed. There they said, okay, we would like that. You said it also kind of positively now when the sanctions, first set of sanctions at least, were agreed on for Russia or for Putin's regime. But there's sadly also a range of negative examples when that doesn't work. And generally, to be honest, I come from the private sector. To have a meeting with 27 people and all of them having a veto, or like basically 27 decision makers, 27 CEOs, is a horrible idea. I would never ever join a meeting where you have basically 27 people who all can stop a process of decision making. So that's just a bad kind of governance. So and there are also more democratically difficult parts of it. I remember when I was traveling in Greece in 2012. And some guy came to me and said, like, you seem nice, but Merkel cut my loan or cut my wage in half. Then you see how these kind of intergovernmental decision-making mechanisms can also be democratically difficult, because obviously this guy could not vote Merkel out of office. So what do we need to be able to deal with the challenges that we face together as Europeans is very simply the kind of democracy that we already know from the national level. Very often we have parliamentary elections in Europe, and then the majority of whoever gets voted into parliament fields a government, and then this government can take some decisions, and then they, sorry for the wording, but they fuck up or they do it well, and then they get re-elected or they get kicked out of government basically by the votes for the parties that follows in the next elections. So that's the system that Volt, revolutionary, wants to somehow implement also at the European level. So it's not that crazy. It's just basically saying, look, what we have on the national level, we also need on the European level. So we have a bit more of a functioning democracy, and we don't block ourselves with vetoes of individual member states. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
Thank you, Damian. To go to Cédric, Damian explained on a more European level, but now looking at the French level, the same question for you. Why is this needed, and what do you propose for the French level?
Thank you very much for this question, and I'm very happy to be able to talk with Damian, because I have been a member of Volt for 3 years. So of course, I have seen you a lot, and it's really great to be able to talk with you on this way. Well, it's one of our 3 priority is to update the democratic software of France, because actually we are, well, I think you put it quite correctly, Damian. Democracy has to evolve, because everything is evolving. Our software, our hardware, it's every month it's evolving, and we are quite used to it, although it's not always a good solution. But the democracy in France, at least, doesn't change. Well, we have a constitution since 1962. De Gaulle thought out the constitution we are still ruling with, and I think it's not adapted to our challenges of today, and that's why we think we need an update. And just to be a bit more concrete, I think most of the people, at least the French citizens, know that we have a kind of presidential monarchy in France. So we have the right to vote for someone, a man or a woman. Well, it has always been a man, unfortunately, until now. And this man, so Macron in this case, can decide for everything. I'm a bit simplifying, but well, it's a bit that, in the palace of the Élysée, one man. So it's far simple than the European situation. It's one man, it's not 27. and he takes all the decision, in a very untransparent way. You don't know what's happening, in the palace, which kind of lobby are active or something like that. And we just want to change that. And actually, we look at what's happening in Europe. We are the only country in the European Union, in France, with such a system. All the other countries in the European Union, the 26 others, have kind of coalition system, kind of proportional representation. And if you want to have a representative system, a representative democracy, at least you need a kind of proportional system. That means if 10% of the people vote for liberal or for green, 10% of the representatives should be green or liberal. So that's one of the very concrete thing we want to implement. It's a integral proportional system. And we also want the parliament election to happen before the presidential election. Because now what's happening in France is every 5 years you vote for someone, and then 1 month after, you vote for the parliament. And of course, what's happening? The president says, oh, you voted for me, so my party needs to have a majority. And that's what's happening every time, 50%. So one party, of maybe representing 20% of the population, is taking all the decision for 5 years. And then it becomes a very conflictual democracy, because you have one side and another side. And each side says, yeah, everything that the other side does is bad, and everything we are proposing is good. And of course, this is so far from the complexity of our world. So we want to change that. And we also want to increase participation of the citizen, because Macron created the Convention citoyenne pour le climat. It was an experiment, very interesting, but we want to make that permanent. So we want citizens to be associated to the decision-making the whole time. And we propose to do that for climate and for social justice. So for these two aspects, we want to have a permanent citizen assembly. Then we want to simplify the access to the democracy, because now we have a lot of rules. I just want to show you that. It's the guideline to be a candidate. It's all the financial, administrative rules you have to follow to be a candidate for the parliament election. And I must say, I tried to read it, but it's just not French. I don't know what it is for language, but I think the only reason for that is to restrain the access to democracy. And for example, we have been struggling to create a campaign account, because we need a campaign account for the campaign. But of course, no bank want to do that, because it's not profitable. So we just want to be able to spend our money, but we have just spent two months of our campaign, precious time, not to convince people, but to find a bank we will open an account. These kind of things, and we have to print our ballot and to send it to the voting place. So this is, and maybe a last point, because democracy is not only in the parliament, democracy has to be everywhere. With the citizen, we talked about that, but also in the companies. And we get inspiration here from the German example, the co-decision model. And we'd like the workers, the employees, to have more influence in the companies. And we'd like to make this compulsory, mandatory, for a company above 500 employees. I won't get into the details, but we really want democracy everywhere in France.
Thank you, Cédric. Another time we'll probably make time to go into the details. But you also talked about accessibility. But what I also think about with update of our democratic software is the representation and inclusivity of underrepresented people in the different parliament. And Volt strongly advocates that this is improved. To switch to Audrey, hearing Damian and Cédric so far, but also integrating the following question. What would you like to concretely implement to ensure the representation and inclusivity at European and French level?
Good evening, and thank you for the question. So, as Damian was saying, representation matters, okay? And in fact, everybody should be a big advocate of diversity, inclusion, and belonging at political level. When you look at what's happening in companies today, they start to understand that. And so lots of them are working more and more to have more diversity where decisions are taken. Because you know that when a team is diverse, the team is clever. And the question is, why isn't that happening at political level? So when you're asking me how to have more representation at political or French level. In fact, there's two angles. There's the lack of resources of underrepresented people to access the political arena, and there's the discrimination of those people. That means the discrimination that you have to face when you're not the norm, meaning white and a man. So in the first case, the lack of resources, we're talking about network, capacity building, opportunities to be able to go in that arena. And in fact, when you look at the political arena, it's all about network. It's all about knowing someone or having the opportunity to go there. And we actually think that every head of party in back should make sure that his staff is diverse, because when you look at the head of parties and the advisor, especially the advisor, they often look alike. But if you represent the people, you should have in your staff as much diversity as necessary, so that you see society with the spectrum of everyone and not only your spectrum. And that, I think, would be a good step to start with. That means that head of political party, they have to go out of the network. They have to go out of their comfort zone. That means that they have to make this extra step to go and look for people in society that can be in their staff or their advisor, to make them dream and make them want to be in political arena. Because there's lots of people outside doing things to help society in NGO and extra work afterwards. So why not ask them? For the second case, when we talk about discrimination, it's more about how the political institutions are functioning. In fact, if you look, when women are in a list, like a pool for an election, they're very often in a place where they can be elected, or the financial constraint that the state put so that they have more women in those pools are not binding enough, and often the party would rather pay than having those women there. So it could be, instead of having this fine, for example, it could be that the state grant that the political party receive every year could be decreased between election if the candidate pool was not including enough women, for example. In Ireland, they're doing that already. And beyond all the financial constraints, that's also helping women to be able to do that, because of course there's a cultural barrier that say woman place is not there, woman place is caring, is to take care of the family. And so that is difficult to tackle. But if political men were publicly stating, I'm not there because I have to take care of my kids, they were doing it, they were showing that family is not only a woman thing, but also a man thing, that will also help to have more women there. If there were more advisor, like advisor of head of party, advisor at the ministry or in the assembly, where we can see people with a handicap, people not more diverse, more women, that will say, okay, there's people looking like me there, so that's fine. And that will help diversity to be there. So there's that. Also, if we talk specifically about women with kids, for example, to be able to vote remotely for X% of the time might help. For example, maybe having women going to the assembly with their kids will show that working women exist and they can be deputy. For example, having more women in policy debate could also help. So as you see, there's no one solution fits it all, but it is the role of political party to make sure to find some.
Thank you. From the answers of all three of you, it's quite clear that we need a democratic update, that there are ways to achieve that, and that there are ways to ensure representation and inclusivity. But what in this discussion is the added value of Volt, a pan-European party, in a national parliament? Let's make this question a bit broader. What in general is the added value of a pan-European party in a national parliament? For this question, I would like to go to Cédric. Can you answer this for us?
Okay, I'm okay to answer that, but I'd like to hear also what Damian and Audrey
Of course.
think of it. Well, we are talking about a national election, and I think there is no better place for a pan-European movement, a pan-European party, than national parliaments, because those are specifically the place where we don't talk about Europe. So I think this is where actually Volt has the most added value. And we already see that in the Dutch parliament, because I live in the Netherlands, and I'm just watching, and we have been talking about Europe in the Dutch parliament for 1 year. And it didn't happen before, we were always talking about what's happening in our little Dutch bubble. But now we are talking about Europe and how we can collaborate with other countries, these kind of things. So I think this is the place to be for us. And to be a bit more concrete, I talked about that with Marike, which is one of the Dutch representative for Volt. And she's now trying to improve the information, the access right in time to information for a member of the Dutch parliament about what's happening at European level. So that means that, we are always, we hear a lot of complaints about what has been the decision that has been taken at Brussels level, at Brussels or in Strasbourg, something far away, somewhere far away. And I think it's very important to involve the national parliamentaries at the right time in the European debates, and to let them express their opinion, and not to complain because they haven't been involved 2 years afterwards. But this is the first thing. And the second thing is that, and Damian just said it actually, that the member states are in charge now. Those are the ones who decide actually on the big crisis, and especially on the EU reform. Everything goes through the Council of the European Union. So they are the ones who take the decision, and the national parliaments have their role to play in it, of course, to play some influence. And the last thing, quite obviously, it's that we can, if you have a pan-European party in several national parliaments, you can collaborate. You can discuss how we can ally to reach our goals together, and you can also look at the best practices. What the Dutch do correctly, how the Estonian government is digitalizing its administration, for example. That's a lot of inspiration we could grab. And I will conclude, because I have a lot of things with me, with one very concrete example of what Volt can do. And I really encourage you to go on Volt France website. It's very difficult to read. It's not in the right way. It's called the European Momentum. And Volt France, for the French presidency of the Council of the European Union, took the initiative to work with every Volt chapters of the 27 countries to name one concession that every member state should do to foster the European Union, to foster the European integration. So this is a very concrete way to demonstrate how a pan-European movement can make things change in Europe, I think.
Damian, do you have anything short to add to this?
I have, but Audrey, if you want to go first, then I'm happy to go.
No, it's fine.
Okay. So first of all, I wanted to say on Audrey's points, I think it's super interesting what you do and what you said about underrepresented groups. And I mean, there's just to make it very tangible, two elements that we're currently trying to anchor in or might have actually anchored in the European electoral law. So, for example, remote voting is something that we're trying to fight for, also via the rules of procedure, but also parental leave. We're trying to now do it that you can basically go for, what is it? I think 16 weeks at a time, and then you can just prolong it as much as you like. And so to basically make politics itself a bit more friendly towards women. I think that's something that we're trying to do, and obviously we called it parental leave so that everybody, that both genders would take it, and so that all genders would take it. So that was the idea. But there's, I think, so much more to do. And the only thing I want to say to this is I'm looking so much forward to a society which is a bit more equal, because I think it will actually change also the way we think about a lot of stuff like leadership and other thoughts. So I'm very much looking forward to it, and I hope we can contribute to it. And obviously zipped lists is also in there. But okay, on the question of the Volt additional value, I mean, Cédric has said it, yeah. But for me, when we were thinking about founding Volt and whether we do a think tank or whether we build a movement or whatever, for me reasoning for going for a party were very much because of the clear theory of change. Yeah. So if you build a think tank, your theory of change is I write some papers and they're going to be very smart, and then I'm going to give them to politicians, and then they will change whatever they are doing. Yeah, you know, it's a theory of change. It doesn't really, I don't know, doesn't really seem so convincing for me. Whereas if you say, look, in every national parliament, we're going to steal seats from existing parties with a very simple question, which is, you know, what's your idea for the future of Europe? And if you don't have one, I'll get you a seat. You know, like that's basically, I mean, a simple theory of change. And I think it's working. I mean, if you look at the Bulgarian parliament and the influence we have there, and as you said, Cedric, also the Dutch parliament, but also hopefully in the, you know, regional elections in Germany and elsewhere, I think, I mean, there's a lot of momentum to push our question forward. And the question is, again, very simple. What do you want to do to fix the European Union? Because it's either going into the nationalist direction and falling apart, or it's going to integrate. And there's no more meddling through, no more middle way. So what are you going to do? So that's, I think, for me, the first and foremost point. And then there's all the topics we care about, because in the end, fixing Europe is fixing Europe so that we can deliver on all, you know, the policies that we care about. And so all these policies also matter on the national and local level. So just to give you one example, I can work on the European asylum system and try to fix the European, you know, level problem of creating suffering by not having a system. But if I go here to Berlin and Neukölln and I look at the asylum seekers places that we create, they're also quite shitty, you know. So if I was a local representative, I think there could be also be done something about the topic that I care about, which is how we welcome asylum seekers and refugees. Yeah? So I don't know. I think that if you care about issues, you cannot leave out one level as soon as you decide to become a party.
Thank you, Damian. Audrey, some final remarks on this explanations by Damian and Cedric.
No, it's quite clear, I think, and completely agree with that. No.
To then touch on another topic, to go more into the policy and electoral topics, the climate crisis. The climate crisis is one of the most serious challenges we face in the 21st century. Drastic action and enormous investments will be required merely to mitigate its full impact. Volt argues that we must steer our industries towards sustainable and renewable production. In this, Volt advocates for green entrepreneurship. To go back to you, Audrey, could you define for us what green entrepreneurship is and which concrete measures you intend to take to promote this?
Okay. In fact, the mistake that organizations, public and private, often do is that they treat climate change as the pillar of climate change as a silo. They treat either the planet, either people, or profit. The green entrepreneurship is a business who understand that environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and economic sustainability have to be treated in parallel, and they include that in their business model. Okay, so that is green entrepreneurship. Basically, it's an entrepreneurship that is really integrated into green economy, is what we call.
And which
now, what measure? Sorry, tell me.
Which measures, indeed, could we take to promote this?
So on the planet side, measures already exist and will be emphasis, like legislation, taxes, green procurement, certification, the high price of the ton of CO2, etc. That are things that are going on with the Green Deal is going to be even more emphasis in the next year. So that is there. On the people side, you need to have more diversity where decisions are taken, because since the COP21, data have shown that companies that have put more diversity at the executive level decrease their CO2 emission the most. That is the data that is a fact. And there is something else. So because of climate change, we're going to have more and more migration, economic migration and environmental migration. But the thing is that the migrants that can move are often educated people who move because they have the means to do it and because they're looking for a better life. But if you look at entrepreneurship in Europe, you will see that 21% of all European funders are migrant today. So there is a potential here, and they often do entrepreneurship that will help society and the planet. And they are more likely to hire other migrants. So it's really something that we have to emphasize, and so make the paperwork, make for them easier to start a business. Voilà.
Thank you, Audrey.
Can I
Damian,
come in on this, Christian?
of course.
So I think I find this super interesting because, like, if you talk about migration and the positive economic benefits, there's like so much to go into. I mean, you could start with the negative side, which is if you don't have migration in Europe over the next years of quite a massive form, GDP per capita will just go. No, sorry, GDP will just go down, not per capita, because like our population will just go down, and Europe will lose in terms of economic relevance in the world over time. And so, I mean, that's just a logical, mathematical fact. So, and then you can think about what you think about that. But so I think what we need to understand is that if we want to continue on this kind of level of wealth that we are currently at, we might need to understand that we need to become immigration societies as a whole. And an immigration society needs to also understand that we need to get rid of the way of how we create identities in Europe, because they're very much built on, where you're born, what you look like, and we need to move away from that kind of identity and somehow create more open identities. And that, I think, is something that politicians don't often talk about. And I realized this in the German election campaign, for example, but also in other contexts. It's just like something people try to shy away from, which I think is really dumb. Yeah, because even if you're conservative and you want to preserve your values, then even in that specific case, you should be even more interested in opening them up so that people can assume these values and assume this identity in a way. So like for the conservatives, I often go to them and say like, what do you say? I don't know. Anyways, so that's just one side. And then the other is, let's say, more the immediate economic benefits. I mean, here in Berlin in 2021, in the first quarter, you had as much foreign capital investment, VCs and other kind of investment as in the whole year of 2020. Yeah? So basically in one quarter as much as the whole previous year. And that's a huge inflow of money and basically investment into young startups. And most of them, and a big part of that, as Audrey said, is actually founded by people who are not from Berlin and often not from Germany and often not from the EU. But what I'm trying to say is that this money is spent mostly on talent these days, because most of these companies are not capital intensive. So the money is spent then on hiring people, if you want to make it simple. And that increases actually, the demand for talent in Berlin massively, which leads to the fact that senior programmers now earn as a base salary 900,000 to 2 million euros in Berlin, which then drives up our housing prices in the market and really, increases also inflation in Berlin, specifically in certain areas. And I mean, sorry for the complex, elaboration, but from all perspectives, if you want to have a thriving economy, it really makes sense to have a functioning talent immigration system. And then you can discuss what talent is. I don't think you should make this dependent on the level of income or education. But it's so dumb. We are so dumb that we are not like willing to be much more, open and try to be much more attractive for international talent to come to Europe. And just one last thought. I mean, I negotiated the blue card, and the blue card is basically the talent visa. And I negotiated the recast, which means like the reform of how this program works. And what we try to get in there is a couple of things. The first one is, if you actually talk to international talent, they will tell you like, look, if I go to the US, I have a huge labor market. Yeah, I get fired in Detroit. Okay, there's not so many jobs anyways, but like, let's say I get fired in San Francisco, I can move to, LA, but also I can move to New York. I mean, you basically have one big labor market. Whereas obviously, if you get a visa for Belgium and you get fired in Belgium, you can't just look everywhere in Europe. You still have to look only in Belgium. So the first fact that we have to understand is that we have not a unified labor market. We have no freedom of movement for international, so third country nationals who come to Europe. So it's really important that we unify that, and that's why we basically said that if you have the blue card after a year, you can move countries within basically a month. So you can just go to another country, and within a month, they basically need to go through the procedures with you. And the coolest thing is now you can take your years that you agglomerated towards a long-term residence with you. So to make it very simple, normally if you stay somewhere for a certain time, let's say 5 years, most of the time, let's say 4, sometimes 4, sometimes 3, depending, you can ask for long-term residence permit so that you're not so much bound to your employer anymore, but you can actually, like have some additional rights which are getting closer to citizens' rights. Yeah? And so now you can take these years. Let's say you work 2 years in Belgium, you take the 2 years and you go then to France. You can then actually take these 2 years with you and say, look, I already was 2 years in the EU, give me long-term residence after 1 year. And the last thing is that we now will work on the long-term residence directive, which actually tells you when you can actually get a long-term residence. And what I will try to do is to ensure that everywhere in Europe, it's only 3 years, so that basically you can ask for long-term residence permits quite fast. So anyways, these are like random facts about like a lot of stuff. I think the main message is we definitely need to get so much more attractive and welcoming to talent. We should also stop mixing up constantly what our asylum system does and what talent does. 95% of the people who come to Europe as third country nationals now before Ukraine are people who come on work visas, on student visas, and so on, and that's good. The 5% who come to seek asylum are also very good, and they're also very welcome. And we should just, in our debate, understand that these are different reasons why people are coming. Yeah, one is because I'm looking for a safe haven, and one is because I'm looking for opportunities in terms of political opportunities. We can also discuss whether it makes sense to completely abolish this kind of stuff.
For now, we unfortunately don't have the time for that, so
okay.
Maybe another time. Thank you, Damian.
Sorry, I can talk for ages about this because it's a topic I care a lot about. Because I'm sorry, it's really destroying your moderation, but I hope you forgive me.
I will forgive you this time. Now, to yet again touch upon another topic, and this is also a bit a serious note: the current war in Ukraine. And of course, we state that we are in full support of Ukraine in their fight against Putin's invasion, but we also stand with the Russian citizens who are opposing Putin and are suppressed. But in this complex situation, in this war, Europe really realizes that we're way too dependent on Russian gas. Though France is, I believe, less dependent on Russian gas than other European countries due to, among other, nuclear power plants. What European alternatives do we have for this gas? And Cedric, how do you think these alternatives will impact Europeans?
Yes, first of all, I think that as a European, we happen now to be able to take some bold decision in crisis moments. In the last crisis, we happened to take to change the game. But what we are missing in Europe is the long-term strategy. To think, because everything that is happening now, we could have anticipated it, and at least since 2014, we should have known that could happen, and that our dependency to Russian gas would cause a problem. Actually, everybody knows that, but we have never been able, as Europeans, to have a common energy strategy. So I think we definitely need that. Of course, now we are really, and I want to add also that I've been advocating for that as an entrepreneur, because, I have in France a company who is doing a renovation for housing companies, and one of our big picture argument is that we have not to be dependent on fossil energy coming from countries who don't share our values, because we cannot assure a kind of good balance of power. About what we should do now, I mean, we really have to try everything we have. I don't like the debate, about what is the best form of energy and why this energy is the best and why this one is absolutely terrible. We are losing a lot of time and energy in political debates about that. Of course, we have to get rid of fossil energy because we want, as Volt, to be climate neutral in 2040. So we really have to accelerate. But I think we should invest on biogas, on hydrogen, on sustainable biomass, in nuclear energy, and we are very pragmatical about nuclear energy at Volt. Because, well, we don't think that nuclear energy is a perfect source of energy, but we think that if we want to be climate neutral within 20 years and to get independent of Russia, for example, we definitely can't stop totally now with nuclear, and we still have to use this low carbon technology. And the last point is that we have to accept, whether it is to get our independence from Russia or to reach our climate goals, we have to accept that we have to, well, we commonly say that we have to save energy, but actually we have to reduce our consumption of energy and materials. And this is a very important point. We really have to think about our use, how we move, in which house we live. We really have to reduce the use of individual cars, to reduce the use of planes. We cannot afford now to travel to another corner of the world every year. So we really have to think about how we are behaving, and, well, just watching people die at the frontier of Europe for very, very important things such as liberty, the right to decide for yourself. Those are far more important things than our little comfort, our purchase power. Of course, we have to focus on purchase power for some people. We definitely need that. But as society, we definitely should make big decisions to reach our most important goals, which are to live a decent environment to our children and to still be free to make our own choices.
Thank you, Cédric. We unfortunately don't have unlimited time, but I also want to go into some questions of the public that are now watching the live stream. And one of the questions is towards Damian and Cédric on, first of all, Damian, how are you currently working together with MPs in the Netherlands and, for example, Belgium, but also to Damian and Cédric together? How do you think you're going to work together when, for example, Cédric is elected in the French Parliament? How's that connection? How do you guys plan to do this?
I mean, I can already tell you that with those elected in the Netherlands and in Bulgaria, we have a weekly call where we basically on Monday, we compare agendas, we check a bit, what are the political topics that are on, and we exchange a bit on what we think is important for us across Europe. Yeah? And I think that's a very good exercise. And obviously, once Cédric, not if, but once Cédric gets elected, and Audrey, you're running as well, no? Like yes. Yeah. So if Audrey gets elected, then I would love to work with you both and have you both in that call as well. I think it would be absolutely amazing. And then at some point, I hope that this call gets so populated that there are too many people and we need to somehow figure out another solution. But for now, we can still manage. Yeah.
Cédric, any remarks on this?
Well, I think he said everything. I have to say that about who is going to be elected, we really would like to both of us to be elected. Alas, we have in France per district one candidate who is able to be elected. You have one main candidate and one substitute. This is the way it is called, unfortunately. So I definitely want to work with Audrey once I'm elected. And in the future, we'd like to think about a binomial way of election, to be able to vote for a couple, man and woman, because this is the way we work in Volt. At every level, we work in couple. For example, I am now a co-lead of local teams in Gouda, in Gouda, where I live, and we are a man and a woman. And at every level, we have this organization, and we would like to do that in France also, because this way you are sure to have a 50-50 representation, and also it's just great to not let one individual take decision. This is one of the bias of our system, especially in France, is what we put all the power in one individual. whereas a team and at least a man and a woman can make maybe a little more difficult. They have to take more time, but far better decision if they work together. Well, and I think, sorry for the question, Damian said it very perfectly. I personally would like to really focus on climate because climate neutral 2040. Well, we just have to have the same agenda at European, national, and local level, so it will be my priority if I'm elected to accelerate.
Audrey, do you have also any remarks on how you, for example, work together with Damian? You're muted.
Sorry. No, I think the participation to the call is a very good thing to be sure that what we want to do at European level is happening at national level. And I think it's the principle of the Pan-European Party. So that it's actually happening in action is a very good thing.
We also have a monthly elected officials call, so it's not only on national level and European level, but with all basically the now more than 100 elected officials from across the continent. So that's also quite cool.
To go into more of, for example, some questions from the public, as we are now sending this out in full in Netherlands and in France, and of course the whole Benelux. What do you think are the main concerns of the French citizens living in the Netherlands and the Benelux, and how do you think you can improve their lives? Now, mainly want to focus on question on Cédric and Audrey, but maybe Damian also has some good remarks on this. Damian is giving the floor to Audrey.
Okay. Okay, so I lived in the Netherlands and now I'm in Belgium. So there's a couple of things I can say and to have discussed with some people. There's the first thing is all about retirement. So even if you've worked only in Europe, if you want to figure out what will be your retirement later, you have to go to each and every country. Okay, so to be able to have that at least centralized for the Benelux, I think would be a good thing, and with easy that we make things easy because France is known for, very difficult administrative things, and that will be something nice. And also, I would like to make the coming back of the people easier because basically, if you worked when you're young and you are encouraged to go abroad, to work abroad, to have more experience, and the French from abroad are actually making the French beautiful outside. But when they go home, this is a nightmare, basically. They have the justification asked sometimes, for example, in Belgium, when you rent a flat, you don't have any justification. You just pay your rent. In France, they give you something called quittance de loyer. It's kind of a receipt every month saying that you pay your rent. So if you're going back to France, they will ask you for that, but you don't have it because in the Netherlands and Belgium, they don't give it, for example. So renting a flat is already, the problem starts from the beginning. And there's a lot of things like find the right person to talk to, how to put your kids at school again, how to find a job, how to ask for help, how all the French administration is very peculiar. And when you go back, this is very difficult. So if you could have a person of contact in the country where you are before you leave to be able to do all of that and arrive in France and don't have to take care of it, that will be absolutely fantastic. I think that these two things already will be a good thing to implement during the mandate. Cédric, do you want to add something?
But yeah, definitely. I'd like to, and I think one issue is the administration. I think you put it really right, but it's also the situation now when we are living abroad. The communication with the French consular administration is quite difficult. It's very difficult to have someone at the line. They are just reserving far too more time to make a passport. For example, you have to book 40 minutes of ambtenaar, civil servants to make a passport. And I think really, once again, have to get inspiration from Europe. And for example, in Estonian, which have a 100% digital one-stop shop for this kind of thing. So we really can.
You have to go, apparently, you have to go to the administration only to get married and divorced. That's the only reason when you have to go to in Estonia.
Okay.
Which is just to underline your point. Like
that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I mean, for some, to marry, it's fine to see each other. I think it's a good way. And the second point, which is very important to me, because I'm a train lover, it's the freedom of travel. And I must say that every time we have a crisis, we just shut frontier. We did that once again with COVID, with no reason. We just shut frontier, between countries, because I don't know, it's politically fine to do that. So I really want to guarantee this right of freedom of circulation, and I also I would like to develop a unified ticketing system across Europe, to make it far more easier to travel by train in Europe. Night trains, high-speed train, intercity, what you want. But I don't have it on me. But in the Netherlands, we have a little cart, and with a little cart, we can use all the system, all the transportation system in the Netherlands. I would love to see that in Europe. That would be my biggest dream. So I will make I will do that.
Damian, any final remarks on this?
I don't think so. I think most has been said.
Most has been said. Definitely. I see a new question from the public, and I still think we have a few more minutes to close this off. It's a question to Audrey. What is it like to campaign for French Parliament from the Benelux and not from France itself?
Yeah. So as a French, I have to say I'm happy to be able to use all the experience that I have from being a friend from abroad. But I've been living in very different countries, and I think when you've been living abroad and go back to France for holidays or to see your family, you have this vision of France in more global context than when you live in France. It's just the situation that makes it that way, because you see the news and you see through the eye of someone that is not French, you see? So, and I think that helps you to understand your country better. So that is it's an experience that is quite interesting to even understand why sometimes French and Europe don't put the same priority at the same level. It's nice to be abroad to be able to understand that. So it's a very interesting experience.
Thank you. Any final remarks from Cédric?
Well, I just want to repeat. I would like to repeat what Audrey said, because she said that perfectly. You have to go abroad to look at your country. Yeah.
I would make it more philosophical, since we're late in the evening. I think you have to leave your home, and you have to leave your family to understand, who you are. Yeah. And I think always entering new kind of circles will open and broaden your mind, and the same is definitely true for borders. And I think it would be cool if we understand that, and then create more understanding. And I mean, in that sense, Erasmus has been a very smart European program to push people to have that experience. So I hope we can also continue on building that.
Thank you all. I hope with this, Cédric,
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that I'm living in the city where Erasmus grew up. So this is a European hero for me. Very good guy.
I hope with this talk this evening, this conversation, that we could give the around 160,000 French citizens currently living in the Benelux a good idea of what Volt stands for and what we want to achieve in the French Parliament. And I want to thank you all for being here this evening, and maybe next time, and good luck in the upcoming campaign and election.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
And
Thank
also
you.
good luck, Cédric and
Thank
Audrey.
you.
Yeah? Like, I'm very excited to see how your campaign will be going. And I always say, you already won by putting your faces out there, and by trying to change politics from like actually being politicians and not just being out there in the world. So I'm really I'm super happy that you do this, and I wish you all the strength and power in the world to succeed.
Thank you.
And Damian, you know that we want to organize a joint event with you in Brussels in May. So I hope that we will meet physically in 1 month.
Absolutely. And then, yeah, that would be an absolute honor if we could do that.
The same.
Thank you very